Hey, Terry here. Welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be starting a new series. If it works out, if it gets enough viewing. Could be an ongoing series, not a two, three, four-parter. Just who knows? This could go for years. I'm calling it Terry's Afternoon Quickies, and this is going to be a series of short videos on a subject that maybe doesn't really justify spending 15 or 20 minutes on, but it's kind of interesting anyway, so it's worth kind of talking about for a couple of minutes. So anyway, this will be the first one. Let's see how they work out. Today's subject is black powder F grades. What are they? What the heck is an F grade anyway? Where did they come from? How do these things originate? How do I know which one I need to use? Is there a problem if I use the wrong one? Does it really even matter? Well, let's start out by going back to Europe, mid 14th century. Back then, all black powder was called serpentine. It was made by grinding the three ingredients, potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur separately for safety's sake, and then mixing them together. And it was literally a black powder. It was a very fine, dusty, talcum-like powder. Well, around 1400, somebody figured out that if they mixed a little water with this powder, they could actually grind all three ingredients together because the water would keep it from burning, self-igniting. So they could mix the three ingredients together. They could use more pressure and they could grind it for a longer period of time. And thus they would get a better yield. But what they also discovered was that as that paste dried out and they would start breaking it up, breaking the lumps up, it didn't dry back into a fine, dusty like powder. Instead, it dried into fine granules. And these granules actually improved performance also. Well, at the same time that this was going on, firearms technology was advancing just by leaps and bounds, going in basically two directions. In the one hand, you had your light handguns, hand cannons, hand gunnies, you could call them, which evolved basically into every handgun and rifle, the handheld firearm, really, that we know today. And in the other direction, cannons and mortars. So through a lot of experimentation, people figured out that the larger or coarser grade of granules worked better in these big caliber cannons and mortars, whereas in your small handheld firearms, the smaller grains work better. And the smaller the bore, the smaller the caliber, the finer the grains seem to work a little better. Well, if it had stayed with that, everything would have been fine. We'd have two grades of black powder today, F and C. F for fine, for handguns, and C for coarse, cannons and mortars. And then if you want to, you could go for P, pyrotechnics grade, which evolved out of the F grades. But of course, engineers can't leave anything alone, right? So we started breaking it up into different grades of powder, different sizes of granules, finer grains for smaller caliber handguns, larger grains for muskets, rifles, big bore, and special powders for the flintlock flash pans. And it just eventually evolved into today's modern F grades, which is generally in the sporting category. That's another thing. We've broken it down into sporting grade, construction grade, military grade, pyrotechnics grade. Well, in the sporting grade, which is what we use in handguns and firearms, you got basically your 1F through your 4F, 1F being the most coarse and 4F being the finest. But does it really matter? Or how do you know which one to use? Or what's the point? Well, by tuning the size of the grains to the caliber of the firearm that you're going to be using them in, you do get a little bit more of an efficient burn and a little bit more muzzle velocity and a little bit better performance. Okay, but does it really matter which F grade that I use? And if I don't know which one to use and I accidentally get the wrong F grade, is that going to cause any problems? Well, that's when the safety rangers stepped in, who love to have an opinion on subjects that they essentially know very little, if anything at all, about. And came up with a couple of myths about black powder. One of them being that, oh yes, if you don't use the right F grade of black powder and you're fill in the blank musket, pistol, whatever, it'll blow up on you, or you'll get a bulge in the barrel and it won't be any good after that. Um, Absolute hogwash. Absolutely does not matter, because that myth is based on another one, and that is that finer grades burn faster and produce greater pressure, more gas than coarser grades. And some people even tried to come up with some science behind that by saying that a given volume of finer grade powder has more surface area than the same volume of a coarse grade, and that's going to make it burn faster. Well, is it really? Let's find out. Let's do a quick test. I'm going to take my ball mill powder that I ran for 24 hours and then corned, and I'm going to burn 1 gram. I'm going to do by weight this time. Last time I did by volume, so this time I'm going to go by weight. 1 gram of each. 1F, 2F, 3F, and 4F. Let's see if it makes a real difference. Okay, so the results are interesting, to say the least. If there was anything to this myth that finer grade black powder burns faster than coarser grade black powder, then we would expect to see a linear progression from coarse to fine, meaning the 1F should have burnt the slowest, followed by the 2F. The 3F should have burnt a little faster than the 2F, and the 4F should have burnt faster of all of them. But what we saw was the 4F and the 1F burnt almost exactly the same, and the 2 and 3F did burn exactly the same. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have to say that there's very little difference. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say that if I tightened up the controls on my test, like the Techno Beanies would love to have me do, and if I did a really good scientifically controlled test, and I was to do 3 burns of each grade of powder and average them together, I don't think we'd see any difference at all between those grades, other than just maybe minor differences that we could write off as test noise. So it doesn't really matter. The same powder is going to burn at the same rate, depending on how large the granules are. There is a little bit of a kernel of truth in this myth, though, and that is that most people actually load by volume, not by weight. And what they do is they'll get a calibrated, or they'll calibrate a measure for a certain size, say 50 grains of triple F. And they'll weigh out 50 grains. They'll calibrate their measure to that. And then they know when you fill that measure up, you've got 50 grains. And out of habit, they just assume that's a 50 grain powder charge. The problem is they'll start pouring 5F in there and thinking that that's a 50 grain charge, because it's a 50 grain charge, right? We weighed it out. It's 50 grains. Yeah, it's 50 grains by volume of triple F. You start putting 4F or 5F in there, you're going to be getting a lot more than 50 grains. The smaller granules allow you to pack more powder into the powder chamber. That's what creates the more pressure, the greater muzzle velocity, and the more power. But as long as you measure by weight, not by volume, and you use the same weight, regardless of the F size of the powder, it doesn't matter. 50 grains is 50 grains is 50 grains is 50 grains. Doesn't matter. So I hope we can put those 2 myths to rest. If you're going to calibrate a scale for 1F and then start filling it with 4F, yeah, that might make a little bit of a difference. But, you know. So, thanks for watching the first of Terry's Afternoon Quickies, and hope to see you next time.